Hello, welcome back to Black Doctors Podcast. I am Dr. Stephen Bradley, your host. This week, we are so privileged to have two guests that you've heard from before. They came back and they're bringing so much value as they were the first time they were on. Dr. Brittne Halford, she's been on the show a couple of times. Dr. Altelisha Taylor has been on before, and they're back as a dynamic duo with some very exciting events that they're going to share. We're going to talk about. We can start with Dr. Halford.
Hello, everyone. I am Brittne Halford. I hail from Flint, Michigan, born and raised. And I did a lot of my education in kind of the Midwest. The University of Michigan is my alma mater. Go Blue. I'm a mom of two children. I'm married to a psychiatrist. And really the reason why I'm here is because I have paid off my student loan debt, $138,000 in 2 years, 9 months. And I want to ensure that physicians, women in healthcare is kind of my target audience, have the ability to do the same, to pay off their debt, to build wealth, and to create a life that is full of joy.
That is fantastic. Shout out. Oh, man. I remember when you posted about paying off your student loans, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm so happy for them. Jealous, but very happy. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, so it's fantastic. Thanks for the invite. But yeah, I am originally from Florida. I am somebody who really thought I was going to pursue a career in finance. A lot of people in my family work in business and finance, and that is the path that I thought I was going to go down. I was a varsity athlete at the time, ended up falling in love with the field of sports medicine. But I think throughout my adult life, really struggled with how am I going to blend these two loves of mine? How am I going to blend this love of personal finance and this love for medicine? And so for a while, I tried to do both individually. So I worked in finance for a little bit and then ended up going to medical school. And it was during that time in training, actually, that I realized, oh man, I think I can blend both of these worlds together. A lot of physicians are not taught about personal finance during their training. A lot of physicians struggle with debt and wonder how to invest. And I thought, man, if I can help other physicians, this would be a fantastic way for me to not only help those around me, but also blend both of these worlds that matter a lot to me. And so that's what I've started doing. I started with creating a blog, Career Money Moves, back when I was a medical student. And it sort of increased from there. I ended up working for Doximity, partnering with a lot of startups. I was on the Money Meets Medicine podcast for a while, and then met this awesome gem over here, Dr. Brittne Halford. And we decided that we really wanted to transform this space together. And so the both of us joined forces. We have created WealthMindedMD and are just really excited to sort of take this world by storm.
And we were talking earlier, WealthMindedMD is a podcast, and you are, at the time of recording, over 2 months in the podcasting space. And how's your experience been so far?
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. Well, obviously it's been fantastic because we're both trying to talk about it. But it's been interesting. One of the things that really mattered to me was creating a show that was different than what I currently saw. I feel like a lot of finance podcasts can either get too technical or be too boring or both. And so a lot of people that I felt like could really benefit from the information weren't listening to the information because it didn't appeal to them. And I also felt like as a female physician that a lot of females were sort of left out of the conversation. A lot of the advice and information was given by males to males and didn't apply as much to people of color or to other female physicians. And so I said, you know what, Brittne, let's create something different. Let's create a show that talks about money, but it's also really engaging and fun and transparent. We separate our show into segments where we're talking about our life as, doctors. We're also talking about our money confessions and being really transparent about the mistakes we've made. We talk about the things that we're super excited to purchase. We, of course, have a financial focus each episode where we delve into a financial topic. Sometimes we'll bring guests on in our Wealthy Insights segment. And so we've really tried to create something that we thought would appeal to the average physician and also be applicable to all people in medicine, including people of color and female physicians.
Yeah. And Alicia was a senior podcaster and I was a newbie to the field, right? So I've learned so much from Alicia. And I love that even though we still identify as, or even though we identify as Black women, because that's what we are, there are so many differences between us. And so we get to bring that diversity to the podcast and our experiences and our perspective. So if you identify with us, you want to learn more about money, then definitely, we've covered everything from paying off your debt and creating a student loan strategy to how to reduce your taxable income and leverage some of these alternative investments that we may not have access to or an awareness that they even exist. So yeah, this has been a fantastic journey, and I'm so looking forward to what is in store for us in the future.
Fantastic. So if you're not driving, scroll over in your phone, look for the WealthMindedMD podcast on whatever app you're listening to right now. I'll definitely be tuning in. I know the bigger finance podcast, there's a lot of people in this space, but they don't look like us. They don't come from our backgrounds typically. And so I'm excited to hear kind of your perspective, because I've learned so much from both of you in the brief time we talked about on the show. I actually did make some changes to some of my financial decisions, which at this point is it's a good time to remind you all, this is not financial advice. We won't talk about anything. You should, don't sue us, essentially. But so excited to jump into this conversation. We're going to talk today about setting yourself up for success as you're starting residency and even beyond. So we just finished match day. Folks are, finishing up that fourth year medical school, or maybe you're pre-med or medical student, or even a resident physician. June is a time, or the summer is a big time for transitions. And I love having just the best of advice as we get started to this next phase of our life. And that's what we're here to talk about. So without further ado.
Yeah. So when you think about setting yourself up for financial success, we think that the first step is to create a vision. Oftentimes, at least for me, I knew that I wanted to be a doctor, even from a young age, right? So in our careers, we have this kind of defined pathway. We have mentors, sponsors, and a track for education. Unfortunately, because we've dedicated so much time to our careers, we have neglected other things like planning for our finances. So we think that the first step is really for you to create a vision, to understand what your goal is. Because too often when we make this transition from medical school to residency, for many of us, at least for me, it was like my first time actually earning like a decent salary. Before that, I had worked as a research assistant and, babysitter and things of that nature. So I really didn't know how to manage my money. And I also felt this burden that I needed to do things right, because I had a family that I had to support and that I wanted to be a good steward. And I think many individuals who are transitioning into residency or into their attending years also feel this desire to manage it well. And sometimes they go and they seek a financial advisor or a financial planner, and there's no problem with that. But what we hope that you can do is to establish a goal and a vision of your financial success for yourself.
Yeah, if I can, add to that, I think for a lot of physicians, or I think when you're in training, right, you have this idea of what you think your life is going to be like as an attending. And for a lot of attendings, once they get to that status, once they finish their training, they realize that the life that they have doesn't match the vision that they thought. Right? It's like, wow, this is different than what I expected. Wow, the money that I make doesn't go as far as I thought. Wow, the work is harder than I realized. And it's almost like they feel fooled and they start to wonder, is this worth it? Should I continue in this path? Maybe I need to switch jobs. Maybe I need to switch fields. Maybe I need to do something different altogether. And they sort of are left feeling like they got duped. And so one of the things that I always tell other physicians when I'm, coaching them or giving a financial wellness workshop or what have you, is to create a vision in your mind and write down about what you actually want your life to look like. Because unless you have a vision for your life, if you just follow the status quo without being really intentional about where you want to go, you may not get there. A lot of physicians who just follow the status quo, who just do what everybody else is doing, who don't create that vision first, end up not having the life that they really want. And so I always tell people to be really intentional. And I think the first step of being intentional is to really create a vision, and by creating a vision, I mean, all right, I want to be able to be loan debt free by this amount of time. I want to have the ability to work part-time without feeling like, I'm sacrificing my family or my financial status. I would like the ability to, work a couple of days a week. I would like the ability to go on 1 or 2 international vacations each year, but really kind of coming up with a vision for your life and then creating some goals around that.
That is great advice. And I am not a planner, which again, I think speaking with both of you has helped me to kind of become more of a planner, at least for big decisions. So I have started using the Notes app in my phone, and I'll just usually when I'm on vacation or on a plane or I have time to just sit and think, then I'll jot down some ideas. I actually still have my rank list in the Notes app from 20, I guess. Yes, our 10-year anniversary. Years. But I don't know. Is that too simple, or are we talking about Excel spreadsheets, or what do you mean by creating a vision? What's it look like?
Yeah. So I think it's different for each person. I think for me, I don't have an Excel spreadsheet of every single goal or whatever, but I do think there's value in writing it down. And whether you write it down or type it down, right, in your Notes app, I think that is a good starting point. What I would tell people is once you have the big picture goals, to get really specific, because I think that unless you get really specific, if you just say, oh, I want to be debt free, that's more of a wish, right? And so I think the difference between a wish and a goal is a timeline. And so one of the things that you can say is, okay, if I want to turn this into something that I just hope will happen or something that I wish will happen, one of the things that I need to do is put a timeline around it and then be very specific about how can I make this happen? So for example, if you're someone who you say, okay, I would like to be a millionaire 10 years out of training, right? Then it's 10 years out of training. That's the first step. I've got some sort of timeline in mind. And then let me think about how I can actually make this happen. Maybe I need to save a percentage of my paycheck. Maybe I need to start investing more money. Maybe I need to, reduce my cost of spending less, right? But it's all about, in my mind, when you're creating this vision of really trying to figure out, all right, where do I want to go? What is the timeline in which I want to reach it? And let me be very specific about how I can make this a reality.
That was a word. The difference between a wish and a goal is a timeline. That's excellent. So
yeah, I think many of us create goals and aspirations. They should be, right? But what Leisha is saying is that there has to be a plan. And we hear all the time, I wear a QI hat also, to create a SMART goal. So for me, a vision is this big arching theme. It could be that you want to have financial freedom, within X amount of time. And your definition of financial freedom might look different than my definition of financial freedom. For some, that might mean paying off their student loan debt or paying off their credit card debt. For me, financial freedom is having the option to work or not, meaning that I have enough money and assets that I could potentially draw from as income that will cover all of my life expenses. So having that big overarching vision is really imperative. And then, like Leisha said, start to create very specific definitions. And this is what I love about personal finance, is that it's actually personal and it's going to look different for each of us. So it requires a moment of reflection for you to sit down and to think about what is meaningful to you. And I also want to give you permission to modify this, because life for me as a mother with 2 children, that vision looks a lot different than what it did when I first graduated from residency. So allow yourself to go through this process and give yourself permission to develop iterations of this. As long as you are the center of that vision, it's not going to completely transform. It's just going to be an evolution of sorts.
That's awesome. So once you've sat down and created a vision, and you're, I assume, working with yourself, your significant other, depending on how your relationship is, what is the next step?
Yeah. So I always tell folks that the next step is to protect yourself. And I know that sounds really simple, but by protect yourself, I mean a couple of things. One, have an emergency fund so that if something unexpected happens, you're not in some sort of financial catastrophe. And the second part of protecting yourself is making sure that you have the insurance that you need. And I know insurance can be a dirty word, right? We get spam email all the time from disability insurance companies, right? We get pitched all the time from financial advisors trying to sell us whole life insurance, right? There's a whole thing about it. And nobody loves to pay for insurance, right? It's like you're paying for something that you hope never happens. And so I get it. But at the same time, this is really important, especially when it comes to long-term disability insurance, because long-term disability insurance allows you to protect your income. And let me put this out here now. I'm not an insurance salesman, right? So I don't get any money from people buying insurance, right? I have no reason, no financial reason at least to talk about this besides the fact that I really think it's necessary. Like, you need to protect your ability to make an income, because a lot of the visions that you create for yourself in your life are dependent on your doctor income. They're dependent on this ability to continue to make 6 figures or more per year for a substantial amount of time. And you're not going to be able to achieve your vision, or at least close to achieving your vision, if you don't have the amount of money that you're counting on. And one of the things that you need to do is make sure that if something happens to you, you still have that amount of money coming in. And the way to do that is through long-term disability insurance, right? And it's not like, oh, if I get in a car accident, it'll pay me out. I mean, yes, it will. But for a lot of people, that's not the thing that prevents them from being able to work in medicine. It's they were diagnosed with some chronic medical condition that sort of snuck up on them. It's, oh, I suffer from a mental health disorder and now I can't work as efficiently as I used to. Or I have arthritis in my hands and I can no longer operate, as productively as I used to. And so there's all of these things that could happen in your life. And I hope that this never happens to anybody. But the reality of the situation is sometimes life's and sometimes things happen that we didn't predict. And you need to protect your income so that if any of those things happen, a chronic medical condition, an acute medical illness that puts you in the hospital, a mental health disorder, or a car accident, or what have you, you are still guaranteed your doctor income and you can still continue to support your family. And so obviously people can probably tell I feel very passionate about this, but I just want to make sure that you're able to, have that vision that you had in your mind, have the ability to achieve the goals that you set. And I think one of those ways to do that, as I said, protecting yourself through an emergency fund and through the insurances that you need.
And when you think about your disability insurance, Altelisha and Stephen, I don't know what your trajectory was of, when you actually secured your insurance. But for example, I'm married.
We're working on it.
Okay. So when I graduated from residency, there was a broker who came to my residency program and said, hey, you need disability insurance. They gave us a presentation and I was like, okay, I need disability insurance. So I signed up for my disability insurance right at the end of residency, right? And my husband, we did the same thing for him at the end of residency as well. However, as I talk about your vision changing, your income might change as well. And so you have to make this protection piece something that you go through each and every year. So you might want to increase your disability insurance to provide a bit more, depending if you were a hospitalist. I'm a hospitalist, so I always think about hospitalists, right? If you were a hospitalist, and then you went back for fellowship and now you're earning a lot more, then you need to update that disability insurance policy. Also, as your life changes. So we had life insurance and we really didn't have any dependents, my husband and I, at the beginning, except us. Now we have 2 children and our parents are also elderly, right? So we had to update our life insurance policy so that it accounted for these additional dependents, these additional persons that we also want to protect. So this level of protection, although you establish it once, you need to go back and revisit it every single year, or at least when there are major changes in your life.
That's good. During my time in the Navy, it was tough to get full disability coverage. So I'm in the process of going back and increasing it now. I know it's very different for people depending on their specialty, but say you're in a field that makes $400,000 a year, single, healthy, roughly how much a month would we be talking about? Like, what are they paying out of pocket?
So the amount that you pay per month depends on quite a few factors. One of the bigger factors is obviously how much insurance you need. The general rule of thumb is that you get enough disability insurance coverage to cover about 60% of your income. And so you calculate what 60% of your income would be, and that is how much coverage you need. That's a general rule of thumb. As a trainee, so if you're a resident or a fellow, there is a cap, meaning there's a limit on how much they will insure you for, because they want to make sure that they're not paying you more to be disabled than your job is paying you to work as a trainee. And so there is a cap in place. And I believe that cap is around $5,000 per month for total coverage amount of around $60,000 per year. So that's sort of the limit that you can get insured as a trainee. And then when you're an attending, you do, as Brittne said, and you reevaluate that policy and you increase the policy limits, right? As you can imagine, the more disability insurance you need, the more coverage you need, the more expensive that gets. And it also can change. So the price can change based on how healthy or not healthy you are, right? Because they're an insurance company. So they're trying to assess your risk. Right. And so they'll look into your past medical history, for example. They're looking to see, are you someone who already takes a bunch of prescription medications? The price will change based on what state you are in. Are you in a state where more people are more likely to get disabled or more people participate in riskier activities? It'll depend on your gender. These studies showed that females end up taking out disability insurance at higher rates than men due to complications from issues like pregnancy. And so usually women are charged more for disability insurance than men. Men tend to die sooner, so men are charged more life insurance. And so there's all these different factors that can factor into how much you will pay per month. So it's hard for me to say you're going to pay $200 per month or $300 per month. I can tell you the stuff is not cheap. I got it as a resident. And at the time I paid I still pay around $100 per month, but I've been told that prices have increased. And so some of my attending colleagues probably pay around $300 or $400 a month. So this isn't necessarily cheap stuff, but I really do think that it is very important. I also want to put a plug here that there's something called the guaranteed standard issue policy. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's important that a lot of the residency programs. So it is a way for you to get your own individual long-term disability insurance policy that is specific to your specialty without needing medical underwriting, meaning they're not going to ask you a bunch of medical questions. And this is available to a lot of trainees and residents and fellows. And so I want to make sure that that's known, because I find that a lot of people don't know about that. And what happens is they apply for long-term disability insurance coverage, and then they get denied because they have some sort of medical chronic health condition. And then it's hard to get coverage later on in the future. And so I want to make sure that trainees know that there is a policy called a guaranteed standard issue policy that might be available to them. I also want to make sure it's crystal clear that we are talking about an individual policy. Oftentimes as physicians, we get some amount of coverage for free as part of our benefits package at our employer. So when you're a resident, you're probably covered under your residency. When you're an attending, usually if you're an employed attending, you have a certain amount of disability insurance that is automatically given to you. But that is usually part of a group policy. It's really hard to qualify because their definition of disability or disabled is different, right? If you can't operate, but you can still see patients on telemedicine, you may not qualify. And so it's really important for you to get your own individual disability insurance policy. And when you're a trainee, you can do that through actually your training program that gives you that guaranteed standard issue policy. So I realize this is getting into the weeds. Feel free to contact me. Go to our WealthMindedMD.com website. Shoot us a question. I'm happy to clarify this if anyone has any questions. I deal with this all the time. I've worked with a lot of insurance agents and used to work in finance. So I'm happy to break this down and clarify situations as needed. But I just really did want to put in that plug. Sorry, that was like a 10-minute answer to your question.
No, that's great. We'll put a link to your website in the show notes that nobody ever reads, that I used to spend a lot of time writing, and now I use ChatGPT.
But our audience is going to be different.
Absolutely. I love this. Thank you. It was a tough question to answer. You did a good job. Long story short, and we'll get to this in a little bit, you're going to make a lot of money as an attending physician, and then that money starts getting chipped away through all these things. So a couple $100 a month is going to go out the door for some sort of disability insurance. And as we progress in the conversation today, we talked about creating a vision. We just talked about protecting ourselves. What's step 3 in this plan for setting yourself up?
Step 3 is create a plan for your debt. And I don't know about y'all, but when I graduated from medical school, I had student loan debt, and it's 6 figures of debt. I graduated from medical school with $131,000, from Northwestern. And I know now the average medical student who's graduating has about $250,000 of student loan debt. That's from graduate school alone, not including undergraduate debt. So this is a huge burden that impacts all of us. And one of the things that I thought when I was in training and as an attending was, okay, I have to pay what is dictated to me. But now that, girls read a little bit more, I have a bit more experience, I know that there are ways in which you can leverage your student loans in order and leverage other aspects of your income and other strategies to reduce your student loan payment. Or if you want to refinance, I'm not saying that refinance is the best option right now, given the economic climate, but that is an option for you, right? So we have to create a strategy for your debt, and that includes your student loan debt. But I also know that many people, when they're transitioning, they have other types of consumer debt. I think, actually, Stephen, you and I don't remember what episode that was, but we chatted about how you went through this transition. And when you transitioned, you were like, oh, I didn't expect all of these costs. How am I going to pay for this? Do I use a credit card debt? Do I take out a personal loan? And I can say, Stephen, from talking to many individuals, that scenario, that narrative is not unique to you, right? But we're left with that burden when we're transitioning, and sometimes it's hard to reconcile. So this is something that if you are a little uncertain about what are the exact strategies, what next steps do I need to take for my debt payoff, there are some opportunities, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Alicia to continue to talk about this.
Yeah, you know what? We all had some debt. I mean, this is just the reality. And we were looking at the statistics the other day, me and Brittne were, because we were working on a joint project. And it was like, over 70% of medical students graduate with over $200,000 of student loan debt. And you know what? The debt burden's even higher for doctors of color, specifically Black physicians, just keeping it 100. And, 25% of medical school graduates have credit card debt. And it was like, I'm that statistic because I had both when I graduated from medical school, just keeping it real. And for me, it was, okay, I knew I wanted to tackle my credit card debt because I had a high interest rate. And I was like, the longer I take to pay this off, the more I'm going to end up paying over time. And then it was like, okay, what's my plan for my student loans? And it was really understanding the student loan landscape, which has changed a lot. Unless you live and breathe student loans like I do, or unless you spend a lot of time doing student loan consults like I do, like you may not know all of the changes, right? It changes like every month. There's like this plan or that plan. There's revised pay as you earn, then it switched to save. And then you got the pay as you earn plan, and people are getting forgiven. And you're like, which program? Should I consolidate? Should I not? And there's all these questions about it. And I'm acknowledging that this can be confusing. I'm acknowledging that things change a lot. And I'm acknowledging that it's really, really important to get it right, though. Because if you choose the wrong plan, you could end up paying tens of thousands of dollars more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you just don't know about one of these loan forgiveness programs, you could be spending years paying off a debt that you could have had forgiven. I find that a lot of physicians anchor on the public service loan forgiveness program, which is a great program, right? It gives you the ability to get your student loans forgiven after making 10 years of payments. And oftentimes your time in training counts. That's amazing, right? But there are other programs too. And I find that a lot of physicians don't know about them, especially a lot of Black physicians. They're like, what? I didn't know anything about this. And so one of the joys of life is just being able to help people navigate student loans. And I know Brittne really finds a lot of joy in helping other physicians sort of come up with a plan to pay down all of their consumer debt. And so we actually joined forces and recently created something that we call our Debt Payoff Bootcamp that combines strategies that Brittne employed to pay down her debt and strategies that I employed in terms of student loans. And so we together, join forces to help people navigate through their consumer debt and come up with a customized plan for their student loans that sort of takes into account all of these nuances and all of these factors. And again, that's available on our WealthMindedMD.com website. But, the goal of this is we want to help as many doctors as we possibly can. We realize that a lot of physicians, especially Black physicians, struggle with this and they need help. And it can be confusing to figure out what to do or who to turn to. Who can you trust, right? A lot of people have conflicts of interest that they don't tell you about. A lot of people give blanket advice that may not apply to you. And we want to be the remedy for that. We want to help solve that problem. And we believe that paying off your debt is a key to financial wellness. Oftentimes physicians have a lot of debt. And one of the mistakes that a lot of doctors make is not caring about their debt and accumulating more, right? There's this saying that people think, oh, when I make more money, I'm going to be rich. Actually, the studies show that people who make more money just get into more debt, because they have the ability to borrow more.
Yeah.
Just keeping it 100. Like, think about it. When you become an attending physician, most people still have student loan debt. And then they go do what? They go and buy a house. And what's buying a house? Getting a mortgage, taking out more debt. And then they have kids and they send those kids to top-notch schools, and that costs money. So they are paying for private school. And then they say, you know what? I don't want to drive this old car anymore. So what do? They get a car loan. And before you know it, you got $500,000 in debt. And you're just like, well, I hope someday maybe I'll be able to pay this off. And so I'm trying to help break that cycle. We're trying to help break that cycle. And, we hope that we can help people navigate through that. And so, this is one of the programs that we have. And, there is an investment required. I don't know about you all in your faith, but I'm Christian. And there's a saying in the Christian faith, like, where your treasure is, your heart is also. And I'm a big believer in putting your money where your mouth is. And sometimes you need to really invest in your future. A lot of times we want things for free, and we sort of hope that we can see the change that we desire. And the studies don't show that. The studies show that you're more likely to pay attention when you invest into something. And so we've created something to sort of align with that principle. We also have our free, Wealthy Mind starter kit on our website. It started as well, but I wanted to give people a small glimpse into some of the resources that may be available to them. And we're not the only resource by any means. I've got some amazing friends in this physician finance space that are doing awesome things with debt. But, not to wrap up this long tangent, I just really wanted to make it clear that point number 3 to setting yourself up for financial success is to have a plan for your debt. And that includes credit card debt, that includes car loans, that includes a mortgage, that includes student loans. And whether you come to us for help or you go to a financial advisor or whatever, I just encourage you to get that help that you need so that you can start to reduce the debt that you have.
Perfect. And this debt payoff boot camp, who should look into this? Is this for medical students or residents, or what point should people look into this program?
Yeah. So for someone who likely resident or attending, there are some opportunities for medical students, but I think when you're a medical student, at least for the majority of medical students, is that they're taking out student loans and they're budgeting from that, and they don't actually have an income. I would encourage medical students, though, because oftentimes they feel like, oh, I just have this debt, I can accumulate this debt, and then I'll create a strategy for it later. No, we are saying that we want you to do something different. And for you to take some time to evaluate your cash flow, to look at your expenses, and really evaluate if you need all of the debt. Because I didn't realize that I could give some of that money back. Like, if I didn't need all of it, right, after I had gone through everything and created my spending plan, if I had money left in the bank, you have to understand that if that student loan amount is unsubsidized, then it's accruing interest, right? And so this is why we're saying that creating a strategy for your debt is so imperative, whether you're a student or you are now at this phase of earning an income and trying to pay it off, because paying off your debt is a guaranteed return on your investment. And not accumulating more debt is a guaranteed return on your investment. So if you're a medical student, take an opportunity to review your expenses. And if you have additional money left over that you've taken out in loans, there's an opportunity for you to reduce the amount of debt so you don't have to pay more on the back end.
Absolutely. And I want to take the opportunity. I'm very cheap. I think Brittne and I kind of went back and forth. There we go, frugal. We went back and forth on who was more frugal in our previous episode. But this is an investment, like Brittne just said. So yes, go check out the Debt Payoff Bootcamp, check out their website and their resources. But these two young ladies have spent so much time compiling all of these resources. And if you put a little down payment on to not make a bad mistake that costs you thousands of dollars, that could be huge. And in terms of, you don't need to live like everybody else in medical school. I was living real broke at Howard. That may be your situation. And you look around and you're like, how are these medical students living in these nice apartments? And maybe they got some med influencer money. They may just have a lot of student loans that they're going to have to pay back later. But I think that kind of leads us into the next recommendation. It talks about saving or how much of your pay you're saving. Where do we go from here?
So, I'm a firm believer that you need to be intentional.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the podcast. We really enjoyed talking with Doctors Halford and Taylor. Join us next week. We're going to continue this conversation and finish the 5 recommendations that they have to set yourself up well on the path to financial success as a physician. So excited. The last 2 weeks, actually, we have ranked on the top 200 list for Apple Podcasts in the category of medicine. It's not possible without your support. If you haven't already, please leave a rating or a review. Always happy to hear from you. Reach out, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at the Lighthouse Podcast or at Stephen Bradley MD. Thanks for joining. We're here because representation matters.